There's a problem or potential sticking point with our process. As you know, service before self is one of the 16 key factors, and of course it's absolutely essential. Linked with the need for an anti-hypocrisy test, actions speak louder than words. So you have to find a means to give. The usual way to do this is through a charity or not-for-profit organisation, collectively known as non-government organisations or NGOs. And here's the problem. Whereas all good causes are worthy, the way NGOs go about providing the needed help must be questioned. The delivery of intended giving will be based on selfishness. Bizarrely, but obviously, because the me-first mentality is completely normalised. The structure of charitable endeavour is therefore polluted, warped or diluted. Historically, charitable giving was done as a heartfelt service to others in dire need. Well, yes, it was sometimes influenced by wanting to be seen as a good person, like in cases where the upper class had the luxury of time, similar to celebrity giving nowadays. It was all done voluntarily as philanthropic activity. Then, in the mid-20th century, charities started paying themselves for helping others. In theory, this change made sense, with the aim of professionalism. But the reality is sadly very different. We saw this firsthand for ourselves when we started working in Ethiopia during the 1984-1985 famine. Seeing starving and malnourished babies, children and adults was harrowing. But it was equally as disturbing when we encountered one charity after another demonstrating near incompetence. The degree of ineffectiveness and inefficiency was shocking. If the various charity staff instead had to run a business, it would have gone bust overnight, with customers extremely unhappy. When we then set up our long-term humanitarian projects in Sudan, including a medical clinic, we repeatedly saw the same poor delivery. Regardless if the charities were British, American, Italian, Japanese, Australian or from any other country. Their level of performance was a long way below what would be acceptable in any other sector, although they always managed to have new four-wheel drives for their expatriate staff to drive around in. The United Nations organisations weren't any better, at all. The government officials of the developing countries, be it in Khartoum, Kathmandu or Kampala, could clearly see the incompetence that we saw. We worked well with government officials, finding they genuinely cared for their people. Some of the best charity staff readily agreed with our concerns, albeit quietly when no one else was listening. Unfortunately, few did anything to change the situation. Psychological avoidance dramatically diminishes caring, with project knock-on effects. The appropriate response to suffering is barely registered. After 25 years of working in the humanitarian field, with experience in 7 poor countries, we only ever encountered a handful of organisations or projects that were well run, other than our own. In each instance, there was an unusual reason which explained the rare exception to the general rule. Therefore, our decision to work differently, not as volunteers nor as paid charity staff, but deliberately as non-paid professionals, was partly influenced by what we saw happening around us. That said, we didn't want any personal reward. Whoever said that life was supposed to be easy? Plus, working non-paid saves a small fortune every year, simply because you're not paying yourselves a salary. So you're immediately more effective and efficient, able to direct the maximum amount of money available to the beneficiaries. If you're wondering how we each survive, the answer's simple. We also have additional jobs, paid ones, with built-in flexibility so we can put our non-paid work first, as the top priority. When you get used to doing things this way, it's not hard to do at all. I should make another thing crystal clear. I'm not just referring to aid agencies here. We've seen the same or similar ineffectiveness and inefficiency throughout the charitable sector, whether it be with wildlife conservation or beyond. NGOs and the UN agencies exaggerate the amount of good they do, glossing over their many failings. Huge amounts of money are involved. Empire building, flag flying and competitiveness are rife. Misuse of funds is compounded by corruption. Staff wages are generous, or more than generous, leaving aside the matter of whether their dubious performance justifies it. And there are additional perks. Find out for yourself how much the top charity staff are paid. You might be surprised, and it'll likely be a hell of a lot more than you live on. Clever report writing and intelligent-sounding jargon hides a mass of practical incompetence. Misfits easily find a job and then get promotion, as there's no commercial pressure to show genuine results. Failure is quickly forgotten or outright ignored. Field trips by management are too short. Red carpet visits for VIPs are little more than a public relations exercise. Project evaluation becomes meaningless without honesty and thoroughness. Ladder climbing career prospects encourage compliance, so any rocking of the proverbial boat is a rarity. The scale of misspending is almost beyond belief. One time, we were discussing charity ineffectiveness and inefficiency with a former accountant for a well-known British aid charity working in Sudan. We put forward our estimate that only 1% of all funding was spent correctly, making an actual difference to the intended beneficiaries. The experienced Sudanese accountant strongly disagreed, insisting it was much less than 1%, backing up his statement with lots of detail. I'm sure you've seen charity appeals where they're asking for your support, your money, claiming it will help in such and such a way. What they're not telling you is how many individual donations it will take to pay for the staff wages. So let's think in terms of multiples of £5 donations to make the maths easy. And we'll focus on just one charity person who gets paid £75,000 a year, a lot less than the top directors, which translates to a staggering 15,000 donations to pay for a single individual's salary, each and every year. Would you feel comfortable fundraising within this organisational structure? What about integrity? So, back to you. You decide to change your life. You come across our work and start watching these films on YouTube, and you see me banging on and on about the need to give, service before self. But how do you do it? You've now been informed that the vast majority of charities are how a lot of people suspect they are. Wasteful and somewhat self-serving. Yes, we fully appreciate you're between a rock and a hard place. Unless you're watching this sometime far into the future, when things have thankfully started to change. Currently, your options are limited. Extremely limited. You could start your own charitable organisation. But will good intentions keep you clear of the usual slippery slope? Can you trust yourself to remain true to values above and beyond the usual selfishness? If you can, what about colleagues? It's almost impossible to achieve anything significant on your own. You'll need others to add their weight to yours. If you're in the UK, or if you can legally move here permanently, you could come and work with us. We've got a unique structure for service to others that's fully in keeping with non-selfishness. We're purposely set up for change. I wouldn't suggest you waste time looking for one of the few exceptions to the rule. Even if you found an organisation not taking a salary for themselves, a range of other me-first psychological factors must be considered. Again, we know what we're urging isn't easy in this one respect. Equally, the necessary actions of service before self can't and shouldn't be ignored. Many years ago, we spoke with and got through to a senior British civil servant in what was then called the Overseas Development Administration. He subsequently tried to raise the matter of aid agency ineffectiveness and inefficiency at several international meetings. He told us his attempts were always met with one of two responses. Either there was complete silence, shock that he had dared to bring up the unmentionable, or else those in charge of the proceedings hurriedly moved on to the next point on the agenda. Institutions are often terrified of change, of exposing their inadequacies. They'll readily employ the tactic of blatant avoidance, refusing to even acknowledge that a problem exists. It's the easiest way to not face reality. Breaking through the entrenched paradigm of selfishness, whether on the level of a society, a charitable organisation or an individual, is a challenge. But it has to be done. Shrugging your shoulders and giving up or compromising isn't an option. You have to find a way. I hope you can increasingly see why we've permanently got these monkeys on the studio desk. Monkey do what monkey see is monkey do what monkey see. It is what it is, and that's the starting point. Avoidance just delays the inevitable, that fundamental change is required, and that the only time to act is now. So dare to be different. There's not much about being normal that you could call seriously worthy. Pioneers to demonstrate a genuinely better way are urgently needed. Before finishing, I'd like to stress once more that we appreciate there's a bottleneck here regarding how to give. As we're almost at the end of this series of films, I assume you'll be able to understand that this situation is somewhat inevitable. The me first psychology affects almost everything. I'll see you again soon.